Barb. Hello, good afternoon. Hello, Rosie here. Happy Thursday, everyone. It's another episode of our Back to Basics series today. All right. And okay, I think the lighting's okay. It's a little it's pretty cloudy here in Calgary today, so it's not quite as bright as I would like it to be, but we'll be fine. All right. Hello, Darlene. Okay, let me see if I can maybe share this in the paper crafting group. See if anyone is around there to join us. All right. Oops. Sorry about that. That's my iPad. All right. And maybe I can't figure out how to do that. Okay, hello. Hello again, Darlene. Nice to see you. All right, let's see if I can. Just going to share this to the paper crafting group. If I can find it here. How's everyone's Thursday going? Mine's been pretty good. No complaints. No complaints. I think winter's back for us here in Calgary, but it's still nice. And of course, when you're looking for something in particular on Facebook, it doesn't pop up. So you know what? I'm just going to skip trying to share this video. I should have done it earlier. Hi, Jenny. Nice and slow. Well, is that good or bad? I don't know. If that's good or bad for you if it's slow. All right. So everybody, today we are talking about inks. And I've got quite a collection of inks as I was digging through my, it's boring, yeah. Yeah, and then it takes the day forever to go by, right? Hello, Lorraine. Happy belated birthday, Lorraine. Yeah, so this Back to Basics series, we're kind of hoping to maybe inspire some people who don't normally make cards to maybe decide to start doing some card making, and just kind of revisit the supplies you have in your stash. You know, and you can use stamps on scrapbook layouts as well too. So we're just gonna kind of talk about a bunch of that stuff. So I don't know about everyone. Those of you who do stamping and make cards, I wonder if you're like me, did you get started at a Stampin' Up party? That's how I got started. And I remember back then it was pretty basic. You had a black ink, just a basic black ink, and then you had a watermark ink. And that was, we get some different looks with watermark inks, but also for heat embossing. So we could heat emboss sentiments and images and all that kind of stuff. So we will be covering heat embossing in another different episode in this Back to Basics series. Hello, Betty and Carol. Nice to have you guys here. But so this is really just an overview of the different types of inks, what you would use them for, the kind of ink that you want to use for particular techniques, depending on what you want to do. Okay. So when we were kids, unicorn, aw, and rainbow ink pads. So cute. Okay, so let's kind of start with your blacks. Now, when I started going through my drawer, I came up with a lot of black inks. You can see here, then we got a Memento, and then some hybrid inks. Now, one of the things I find interesting now, because there's different ink formulations in that, is how many of these inks will actually work for both Copic coloring. So if you want to color with alcohol markers or watercoloring. So if you want to color with, like a water reactive actual watercolors, watercolor powders, and I'm going to show you how you can actually use some of these dye inks and the Distress Oxides as a watercolor ink as well. But so what I went ahead and did is I stamped all these inks out onto paper. Now the VersaFine, I will say, this is a pigment ink, and this ink is fantastic if you've got a really detailed image. However, you will have to heat set it or put it aside for a day or so to let it dry if you're not going to coat it with heat embossing. Now, that being said, this is fantastic for sentiments, and especially if you want like a black heat embossed look, and a heat embossing, it kind of raises the image a little bit. Let me show you. Kind of adds a bit of depth. So I'll just show you here on this card. That's been gold heat embossed. So it's actually stamped with a gold pigment ink, but you can kind of see that you've got just a little bit of dimension. That's kind of what the heat embossing does. So that'll do that with your sentiments as well. But rather than use a clear watermark stamp pad and then coat it with a black embossing powder, you can use this VersaFine, hello Jennifer, or a black pigment ink, and then just coat it with clear embossing powder, and then you don't get little stray flecks of black embossing powder on your paper. But we'll go into more depth, into more detail with that on a different Facebook Live, because there's a whole other rabbit hole to go down heat embossing. Okay, so what are all these black inks, and what in particular do you use them for? So I thought we could do a little experiment. So I stamped all the black inks that I had in my stash, and I've stamped them onto just a white Hammermill. This is 80-pound Hammermill cardstock, which you can use for coloring with alcohol markers. So I thought we could do a little test here and see if all these inks will work with alcohol markers. Now I know the Lawn Fawn Jet Black will, because it's alcohol marker friendly. The Memento is kind of the standard as far as alcohol friendly black inks. Okay, so, and I know this is a lot of people's go-tos. I kind of usually start with the Memento as well. That's my go-to. Now, then we've got the Gina K Amalgam ink, and I'm not sure, I think it has a different name now, this ink. I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but this is also alcohol marker friendly, and it's also watercolor friendly. Okay, so this would be what we'd refer to as a hybrid ink. So a hybrid ink can be used on both for water techniques, water reactive techniques, or because it won't react with the water, and for alcohol marker techniques as well. Okay, hello Shirley. The Hero Arts Intense Black, another great black ink, and this works, we'll see if this works well with alcohol markers. I think it will. Okay, then I've got good old Canadian company, so the Crafton Kimmy Stamps Hybrid. This is labeled as a hybrid ink, so it definitely will work. Then I've also got the Altenew Crisp Dye ink, Permanent Black. Hi Melanie. And then I've actually got the new Altenew Permanent Black, and they refer to it as a pigment ink. So generally pigment inks do not work with alcohol markers, but we're going to give this a try because I did look it up on their website, and this is a new ink formulation that Altenew has, and it says it works with alcohol markers, so we're going to give it a go. And how will we know if it works? Well, if our images do not smear, then we know it works. So let me just zoom in a little here, and I'm not going to color this whole image because it would take me way too long. We're basically going to test it out. Oh, okay. Anybody else having any issues? On my end, it seems to be going okay. But I also did plug in my PC, which seems to be my only computer that actually is happy with Facebook. And I'm not making that up because usually I lose the live and then I have to quit and go watch the replay. So sorry about that, Betty. So yeah, if you have to, just pop back in and watch the replay. Okay. Okay, yeah, you know what? That's hit or miss sometimes with how the Facebook connection goes and the feed. I know I have issues quite often, actually. Actually, the only place I never have issues with Facebook is on my phone, but I hate trying to comment on my phone. So I've got some Copic markers here. The color doesn't really matter. We basically want to test this out. This is the Altenew Permanent Black pigment ink, as they phrased it. So I'm just gonna kind of color it a little bit down here. We'll do a couple of different colors just to see. So far, so good. We don't have any smearing. Hello, Maureen. And then we'll kind of add a little bit of that second color. Kind of blends in there. You're on a beach. Oh, stop it, Lorraine. I wish I was on a beach in Mexico right now. And then we'll just add a little bit of that lightest color. And yeah, so this ink will work. What kind of ink does everyone have in their stash as far as a black ink? Now, my assumption would be that if the black ink works, that if you're using the same type of ink from that company in like a colored ink, then that you should be able to color over that colored ink as well with a Copic marker. But we shall see. Okay, and so now let's give it a shot on the permanent black. Jenny, you have VersaFine and Lawn Fawn. Ranger Archival, that's a good one too. Yeah, I love that Altenew Obsidian. It's fabulous. It's a fabulous black. Okay. And again, we're just kind of really doing just a little basic test here. And that seems to hold up pretty good. I'm only going to do 2 colors. Okay, so that's a great ink as well. That will work. Why do I have so many black inks, if you're wondering? I have no idea. Why not would be my answer. I never know why I do. Okay, so let's take a look then here. We've got the Hero Arts Intense Black, and this should work as well. So really any of these, you know, you don't need multiple black inks. If you've got one and a re-inker, that's all you need. Okay, so this works great with the alcohol markers as well. Okay, now we'll give the Gina K. I know this one works actually, for sure, because I have used it before. I think if I ever run out of ink, one type of black or one ink pad of black runs dry, then I've definitely got like 69,000 backups on that. Actually, do you have re-inkers for all of your black inks? I know that I do not. So I'm actually quite happy that Altenew finally came out with a re-inker for their Obsidian ink, because they actually did not have a re-inker initially. So that one, I think I bought 3 of those ink pads just because I didn't want it to dry out and then not be able to use it. Okay, so now we've got our Pink Fresh Detail Black. We'll give that a quick little color there. All right, and yeah, we've got, it stays nice and crisp, so there's no smearing. So that's an alcohol marker friendly ink as well. And now I know this one is because I have used it for Copic coloring, but for the purposes of the demonstration, we'll just lay down some alcohol marker color. Hello, Mary Jane. Yes, Lorraine, I agree. It's my favorite for sentiments as well. The Obsidian, the Altenew Obsidian. Okay, and we have no issues with that either. Okay, so all these inks are definitely, let me just try to zoom out here. Oh, and I'll do the Memento Tuxedo, just so you can see. And this we know is definitely alcohol marker friendly. So it would work any alcohol markers if you've got the Spectrum Noir, these Copics, the Altenew artist markers, those new ones that everybody seems to be talking about, I forget, the Ohuhu or something like that. I don't know what it's called. These black inks will work for all of them. So, and the Memento is pretty much the standard. That was kind of the first one that came out specifically for alcohol markers. So all these inks work great with our alcohol markers. Now, what about water? Typically, you would find that an alcohol marker friendly black ink is probably not going to play very nicely with water or a water-based type of coloring, but let's give it a try. This is not watercolor paper, so I'm not going to use a ton of water, but Olo, yes, thank you. Thanks, Lorraine. The Olos as well. But one of the things you can do, and we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get, when I kind of talk a little more specifically about distress inks and distress oxides. These are water reactive inks. So these inks are actually pretty cool. You can use them for watercolor as well. So I thought, why don't we just give it a try on these stamped images, since they're already stamped, just to kind of see, would we be able to use that ink with not a whole bunch of water? We're not going to use a ton of it, but just a little bit of water. And will our image run, or will that ink kind of be able to hold up to a little bit of watercolor? So I've just put a little bit of distress ink on this craft mat. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit more again. And then I'm just picking up a little bit of water. I'll just move that down so you can see with my water brush. And we'll just kind of lightly, this is, like I said, this is not watercolor paper, so I don't want to put a whole ton of water on here, but we'll add a little bit of color. And that actually doesn't seem to be running at all. Okay, so that's the Altenew Permanent Black Pigment ink. So you'd be able to use that. Now, I'm not going to say for sure on with a lot of watercolor. I think you'd have to test it out. But just for this little tiny image and just a little bit here and there, that seems to be working. So the black is holding up. It's not smearing or smudging or running. Okay. So that's now the Altenew Permanent Black Crisp ink. All right, so let's see how our amalgam ink should work, because we know this is a hybrid ink. That's how it's, one of its selling features is as a hybrid ink. So that one is definitely fine. So let's try the Hero Arts Intense Black. So when we kind of experiment with this, then you can kind of get an idea that, you may not need to have a separate, another black ink, unless you want to do a particular technique. Okay, so that one works as well. Our image is not smearing. And again, I'm not using very much water, just a teeny tiny bit of water on this distress ink. And I know that it will definitely work on the Craft and Kimmy, because that's a hybrid ink. And let's try that Pink Fresh Detail Black. All right. And that seems to work quite well as well. So just from this quick little tester page, we're able to use all these inks with both alcohol markers and with a little bit of, I'm not going to say watercolor per se, you'd have to try. This is just a little bit of distress ink that I've added a teeny bit of water to and kind of created a watercolor with it. But it's definitely not as fluid as an actual watercolor. So you'd have to experiment with that. But look, we'll kind of talk a little bit more about using the distress inks as watercolors. But before we do that, let's talk about these two different types of distress inks. Okay, so we've got our distress ink and our distress oxide ink. So what is the difference between the two? And do you need both? So I would say that's personal preference on if you want to have both. I have pretty much the full set of distress oxide. I'm actually going to bring in the distress ink. I had the same one here. Where did I put it? Oh, it wouldn't be alive if I didn't misplace something. Oxide. I literally had the distress ink pads. Oh, there they are, right in front of my eyeballs. Okay, here we want to compare the two here. So this is, it's just called a little splat mat. It's basically, you know, those craft sheets. It's essentially the good old-fashioned Ranger nonstick craft sheet, just cut in that cute little shape. I think I got it. I was at a scrapbooking workshop, a weekend of workshops, and that was kind of in our little goodie bag. I just didn't want to haul out my glass mat. So yeah, one of these little craft sheets. Carla's live, she went over craft sheets and different mats that you can work on last week. So if you haven't had a chance to catch that video, go ahead and catch that. And she shares a bunch of these different types of mats that we can use. So right off the bat, the distress oxide and the distress ink, you can see that the color, even on the label here, is just a little bit more vibrant for the distress ink. And the distress ink is basically a dye ink, quite vivid, a little bit transparent, and it dries pretty quickly. The distress oxide is a hybrid ink, so it's part pigment and it's part dye ink, and it gives more of an opaque look, so it covers really well. So which one do you want? Well, it depends. If you don't have either of these inks, I think you'd have to think about, do you like a really vibrant ink, which the distress inks are quite vibrant, or do you not mind a little bit of a muted? And when I say muted, I'll kind of show you the samples here that I did with the same colors. A distress oxide kind of gives you a little bit of a chalky finish. Okay, so I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom back up here a little bit. Sorry for shaking my phone, if I can remember how to do this. Oh, my phone is not cooperating. Cooperate, phone. All right, sorry, I'm going to have to raise you up a little bit. My phone is not cooperating. All right, excuse my sweatshirt. There we go. Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so on the left, we've got the distress oxide, and on the right, we have the distress ink. So you can see the colors are kind of similar. Maybe I'll turn them this way, so if my phone would cooperate, it would be really nice. I zoomed in, and now it won't zoom back out. Oh, sorry about that, guys. I'm just going to raise you up a little bit more again. I just want to get both of these in the frame. Okay, there we go. So if I can capture this on the camera, this is the distress oxide. So you get a lovely, lovely, lovely coverage, and it is really easy to blend with. Yeah, and even when you kind of feel it, like this is dry, so it doesn't leave any, no ink is going to come off of the paper, but it almost has a slight velvety feel to the paper. It's really pretty. And then this is our distress oxide. So you can see these are the exact same colors. We've got Villainous Potion at the top, Picked Raspberry in the middle, and then Salvage Patina at the bottom. So you can just see that the oxides are just a little bit more vibrant. Or sorry, the distress are a little bit more vibrant than the distress oxide. So it's really your personal preference. I have some distress inks just because they came out before the oxides, but I have since acquired the full set of distress oxide. And I've only added the odd distress ink if it's a new color that I really like here or there. Okay, now both of these inks are water reactive. And so what does that mean? That means we can come in, you can spritz it with a little bit of water, creating some water droplets. And let me grab my paper towel that I forgot to grab. Oh, it's a little piece, but it'll work. Okay, then I can kind of blot that a little bit. And so on the distress ink, you can see it just gives a kind of a little bit of texture. And we can also add the water on the distress oxide. Oh, my sprayer's running out of water. But it will oxidize. So what does that mean? It almost gives you a look, almost like a slight faux bleaching technique. Okay, now this is just regular cardstock, so if you wanted to be adding water, doing water techniques with these inks, you're going to want to use a little bit of a heavier cardstock, I think is better. So a mixed media, a watercolor would work really well, but I can dry this with a heat tool and then move along and use it, either die cut out of it, use it as a background. Okay, so this is the distress oxide and the distress ink. All right, so I love how those blend, super fun to blend. Now, what about the different companies? So what I would recommend, especially if you're just getting started in stamping or making cards, I should say, if you don't really have many inks, it's a good idea to invest in some ink families. Okay, so Altenew and I think Pink Fresh also packages theirs in 4s. So these are the mini cube inks, and so they come in color families. So if you don't have many inks, but you want to kind of get started in doing some card making, then I would definitely recommend one of these color families. And what I would say is pick your favorite color. So if your favorite colors are pinks or purples or reds or oranges, then you can pick those shades of ink. Maybe depending on what you want to use, if you're going to be, you're going to be stamping lots of flowers, or you want to be ink blending through flower stencils, for example, then pick like I said, your favorite color. So something for your blooms, let's say a pink and then a set of greens. That will work for leaves. And that will do you for quite a while. Okay, now we can use these inks for a little bit more than just stamping, okay, or ink stenciling. So one way that is really fun to use your inks, and that can be, we can use the distress oxide, the distress. One of the techniques is called ink smooshing. Now, I'm not sure where my paper went. My paper has disappeared. Surprise, it's alive. It almost disappears. But let me just grab another sheet here. So what is ink smooshing? Well, exactly like it sounds, you're just going to smush your paper into your ink. Now, an oxide or a distress ink works super good for this technique, just because these guys are made to work well with water. They play nice with water. Okay, so I'm going to miss that. Just bear with me while I grab my cardstock. I'm just going to get a thicker sheet of cardstock. Oh, you know what? I've got some over here. 1 second. While I wander around the craft room. Okay, I've got some scraps from my Better Press cardstock here. Okay, so with ink smooshing, now I'm using quite a heavyweight cardstock here, so I can add quite a bit of water. You basically smudge your ink pad on your craft sheet, add some water, and then you're just gonna go in and dip your cardstock. So super simple technique. You may have seen it before. if you haven't. This is a fun way to create an interesting background. And I'm going to hit that with a little bit of heat. Using my heat tool here, just have to plug it in 1 second. And I'm just going to dry that cardstock. And this is the oxide ink. We're going to go in with another color of oxide ink. Okay. So we're just going to give that a dry. We're going to dry it in between layers. Hi, Irene. Oh, you're fine. No worries. Okay. That'll work. That's pretty much okay. Okay, so now I can go in. I can add another color. Let's add this Villainous Potion because it's purple. Whoops. Hey, surprisingly, it landed face up, so I didn't wreck anything. All right. I'm going to mist that with a little bit of water. Oh, I got to add more water to my mister here. Not quite as much, so this should be quite dark. And then I'm going to go back in and just pick that up. Okay. So, and you can see how that has just kind of a nice little muted, little bit more of a muted effect. Let's see what that would look like with the same colors in the Distress ink, if it's going to be much different. I'm just going to set that up here. All right, so I'll use my picked raspberry in the Distress ink. And mist that. And now pick that up. All right, so you can see how that's just a little bit more vibrant than our picked raspberry in our Distress Oxide. All right, I'm just going to add a little bit more heat. We'll add that other layer of Villainous Potion just so you can see what that looks like. So again, this is ink smooshing, so just a super, super easy technique. So just another way to get a little bit more, some different uses out of your ink. Obviously, as I showed you those other panels, you can ink blend with your inks. Clearly, you can stamp with them as well. Okay, and then you can kind of create some interesting backgrounds with your Distress ink and ink smooshing. Now, the one thing to note, okay, I don't want to forget to tell you guys this. So Distress Oxide and Distress ink do not play nice together. Okay, so you want to make sure that if you do have both inks, that you do not use the same blending brush for both inks. They just don't react well. If you actually have some Distress Oxide on that ink and then kind of take it to your Distress ink pad, you could contaminate it. So you just want to make sure you always have 2 different blending brushes if you're doing any ink blending with them. Okay, so that's with the Distress Oxide and the Distress ink. But you can also use your, maybe I'll use this because it's a bright color. You can also do the same thing with the dye inks as well. Okay, this is the Altenew Fresh Dye inks. So I'll just put a little bit on there. And you can ink smush with these guys too. All right, just grab a piece of paper. These are all some scraps. Okay. So you add a little bit of water and you can ink smoosh with these guys as well, with any dye ink as well. Okay, now how about watercolor? Can we watercolor with these dye inks? Well, let's give it a try. I've just got a stamp here that I stamped in Obsidian Black, and then I added clear embossing powder over top. I don't know if you can tell, it's got a little bit of a shine. That's the embossed image. So, well, let's use this tickled pink. That's a pretty color. All right. So we'll put a little bit of that down on the craft mat. And add some water, a little bit of water. Really got to refill my sprayer. I think that's enough. And pull in my watercolor brush. And so this I have stamped on watercolor paper. Okay, so I should be able to, I don't need to be too concerned about how much water I use on here. Okay, so we can watercolor with this dye ink as well. The only thing I would say, this dye ink will dry quicker than a watercolor, an actual watercolor. So you'd have to work a little faster with that. But there you can see how you can use it for more than just ink blending or stamping. Okay? So if you don't have watercolors, but you've always wanted to try it out, this is an excellent way to try out some watercoloring with what you have in your stash. Okay? So that's with our dye inks. Okay, next, let's talk about our good old, I talked about this guy a little bit, our good old friend, the Versamark watermark stamp pad. So if you're just getting into making cards, you definitely want to get yourself a good black ink, something then that you can use for both alcohol markers and watercolor. And then you for sure want a Versamark stamp pad. Now this guy has been around the block, he's well used. But it's a super sticky ink here, and you can use it for creating a tone on tone effects. So let me just show you, I did a couple here yesterday. See if we can see that. So this is navy cardstock, and I've stamped, I have this guy in my stash. It's an old stamp from Wild Whisper, the birch bark stamp. So that's what the stamp looks like. And so I've stamped just the Versamark ink on this cardstock. Okay, so you can see how you get that background pattern. It's fantastic for doing any type of tone on tone technique. So that's on just the Versamark ink. So I stamped it and then I set it aside to dry. You could dry it with a heat tool. With inks than real paints. Oh, yeah, Jenny, I agree. Inks are nice to stamp with. Okay, and now here's the same stamp, but this time it's on craft cardstock. And here I've heat embossed it with clear embossing powder. Okay, so you can see the pattern stands out quite, it's much more predominant. Okay, so I'm just tilting that there. You can see that shine from the clear embossing powder. So super way to do it, to do a tone on tone. Like I said, I love that. I kind of forget to do it. So for sure you want one of these guys in your stash. And if you don't have one and you pick one up, make sure you get the re-inker as well. Okay. And I've had this, I think I bought this actually when I first was introduced to Stampin' Up, and that was, 20 plus years ago. I won't date myself by letting you know exactly how many years ago it was. Okay. Now, the other ink I want to talk just a wee bit about, and that's the metallic inks. And this is the Obsidian Pigment ink, which is from Altenew. Hello, Sheila. So these are both pigment inks. So what does that mean? That means that they're slow drying. So you can dry them with a heat tool. You don't have to heat emboss them if you don't want. Yours is at least 25 years old. Yes, Irene, I think mine is that old too. So you can use a heat tool to dry the pigment inks, okay? Or you can also stamp with them and coat them with clear embossing powder and then heat set with your embossing tool. which is often the way I like to use them. I'm just going to bring this card back in because that I showed you earlier. So this is actually stamped with the, actually I think it's the enchanted gold. I've got the antique gold. The enchanted gold is a little brighter. And then just coated with clear embossing powder. Okay, so if you like the look of embossing, but you don't really want to get into, collecting a lot of embossing powders, I highly recommend getting just clear embossing powder and kind of a couple of your favorite pigment ink colors. If you want a silver, a gold, a black, and then you're set. You can just clear heat emboss. Or the VersaFine for black. Again, this is a kind of a staple ink. It's a great one. Okay, so I just want to show you one more sample here. Does anybody have any questions? Questions about ink? Even if there's a particular ink I haven't really covered so far, or you've got any questions about what you've seen, just feel free to pop them in the chat. I just want to show you when you use a color family. And again, we'll get into layering stencils in another episode, but I wanted to just kind of show you how easy it is. So I've got this color family from Altenew. It's called Dried Petals is the color family. And then this is a layering stencil. I forget what it's called. I think it's Mega Rose or something like that. But you can see how with these 4 ink colors and then with the layering stencil, you can use the one color family and you can get yourself a beautiful image. That would be a beautiful focal point on the front of a card. Okay. And then with this one set of inks, you've got multiple colors to use for watercolors as well. Okay, and I just want to check my notes. Make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Oh, now, interference inks. Some of you might have interference inks. Unfortunately, I don't. So I wasn't able to show them here, but I know Carla has done a previous video on the interference inks. So probably if you just go to the Facebook page and click on media and videos, you can scroll to find that one. But that is a fantastic ink that basically you're essentially getting 2 ink colors in one ink pad because the color looks different on dark cardstock than it does on white cardstock. So if you're just starting out, not sure what kind of inks to get, a couple of those would be actually a great idea because you're basically getting 2 for 1 as far as your colors. So that's kind of a quick little roundup about inks, all the different kinds. I think I've covered kind of the basics for you. If there's any questions that you have or that come up after or something that I didn't really address that you would like an answer on, then just post it in the comments or post a question on the Facebook page or trying to think what's the best way. Yeah, or just private message me or something and we'll get you an answer to whatever your question is. But yeah, so would love to know what are your guys' favorite ink colors. So, or even ink companies. Are you a Pink Fresh? Are you Distress Inks all the way? Would love to have you share that maybe in the comments of this video. But thanks so much for stopping in, tuning in, and yeah, learning all about inks. It's been a fun afternoon. Have a wonderful rest of the day and enjoy your weekend, and hopefully you get some time to do some crafting. Take care, everybody. Bye.